I want to start by welcoming everybody. Deeply appreciate your taking the time out of your busy days to spend a little bit of time with us. And what I'd like to do is just take a moment to introduce you to the Marketers Trust and what that's all about, because the Marketing Trust is the reason we're here, and it's something I think that you should find a great deal of value in. The Marketing Trust has been around since 1997. The member agencies of the Marketing Trust have created and managed multi-channel B2B and B2C programs for over 3,000 clients. Top name clients like HP and Xerox, to name a few, as well as hundreds of small and medium-sized companies across all industry sectors. It takes a collaborative, evidence-based approach to marketing, which we, personally have found a tremendous amount of value in. And they put together programs like this free of charge. So it's an opportunity to experience a number of deep dive workshops crossing all different areas of specialization and expertise. And, I guess the question that, should be asked, are you tired of trying to move the rock up all by yourself? Are you still trying to figure out, your sales and marketing strategy all on your own? One of the advantages that we found is it's an opportunity, but, to bring your questions to a group of experts as opposed to trying to sort the question out for yourself. And so with that, we'd also like to take a moment to get to know a little bit about you. And so taking the liberty of putting together a quick poll. And if you wouldn't mind responding to this poll, it would be a great help. It's only 3 questions, so it's quick, it's easy. All right, so I'm going to move that off to the side. Hopefully all of you got your chance to complete that. And so with that, we'll continue. And so look at the subject matter. We look at our approach in this. We found that there are 7 building blocks that we try to work from. And the first building block is envisioning what it is that you're trying to accomplish. What is it that you're trying to build and deliver to your clients, to your students? And we often, suggest to our clients that as part of that envisioning process, that you look to the end and then work backwards from the end state. What's the end state that you want to deliver to your clients? What do you want them to end up with? And then work backwards from there.
And the next building block we're going to talk about is designing your offer. And this is the one that we're going to really delve into much more extensively, because we find that it's often not kind of delved into at the depth that is helpful for people as they're trying to pull all the various factors together in building your course. So here we're going to go. Again, as Deryck said, you start planning with the end in mind. So, why are you interested in creating a course? You have to know that why and what's going to drive you, what's going to motivate you to do this. How does your program fit into your overall business structure? Because there's a multitude of different types of courses, high ticket, low ticket, everything else in between. And you need to understand kind of how you're placing that within your overall business model. You also need to have a grasp on your own level of expertise. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later, what expertise really means. An important facet is I come out of an education background, so knowing instructional design principles is really helpful. It helps you create learning experiences and materials that result in the acquisition of knowledge or moving a skill forward. That there's a particular discipline that's followed, that you need to understand kind of the needs of the people who are coming to you, what they either want to learn or are required to learn to pass a certification or get some job knowledge. Then you design your process to help them learn that material based around what they need to know and the standards of which they need to achieve to meet that knowledge level. You develop your training materials, your lecture plans and such based on that. And within the instructional design system, evaluation is also very important to know the effectiveness of what you're trying to teach and how well your students are understanding. Gagne is a theory that frequently comes up when talking about instructional design, and he has 5 major categories of learning. There's the verbal information, there's intellectual skills, there's cognitive strategies, there's motor skills and attitudes. And each of these has both internal and external conditions that are needed for the type of learning that you're going to be assisting your students with. So for example, just with the cognitive learning events, here would be a framework to help people gain cognitive knowledge. First, you have to get their attention. Simple, but not always so simple when you're working with students, when you're competing with lots of other things going on in their lives. Then you need to understand who they are, what their objective is for wanting to either learn the material, or if it's some kind of training program that they have to learn the training material for a job situation. Then you want to help them recall prior learning, because we build on information that we already know. So if we can put it in a context, that's very helpful for them. Then you are going to present some kind of stimulus that is introducing new content, new ways of doing things. You're going to provide guidance along that pathway to help them understand the framework and how this all fits together. You're going to try to elicit some type of performance, because we learn more by doing as opposed to just sitting back and taking in knowledge. And you're going to provide feedback and review of their performance as they are going through the learning process. And then as kind of a final step here of ways to help them retain that information and also transfer it to a larger framework. One of the methods that I'm going to talk about next is called the Assure method. There is multiple methods of instructional design, and we talk about those more when we're doing a longer course. But I just selected one for today to give you kind of a framework understanding. So the A in the Assure model says, analyze your learners. You need to understand who your students are, where they're coming from, what their motivation is for learning, what level of learning they're hoping to accomplish. Are they learning just as beginners, or do they want to totally master the subject matter, and how you're going to accomplish that. And then you want to really look at the standards for learning. Sometimes those are standards you set yourself, or there may be, if you're teaching something that's related to, if somebody's getting a certification, for example, there may be standards that are in place that you need to teach to those certain standards. And that's going to allow you to set your learning objectives for the method and proceed to meet that. The next phase, the second S, is selecting your strategies, your technology, your media, and your materials. This is your whole design process of how you are putting together the various facets that you need in order to convey the learning that you want your students to gain from the process. The U stands for just utilizing all those various elements that you have put together in your design process. This is where you're actually teaching your students. The R stands for requires learner participation. And I know requires that may sound a little strong, but we know that we learn by doing. So you want your students to be engaged in the material, to be actively practicing, so that the learning is an active process. They will get a lot more out of the experience that way. And then the last E here stands for evaluate and revise. And as Deryck said, that's, a standard theme you're going to hear at various parts in the process. We have, revising, looking at your whole program, evaluating and revising. We have that at a level of even at each individual lesson that you're teaching somebody, that you need to do that. And here's some tips for you, just of thinking about designing a curriculum for a course that you might want to teach. One of the first things that I like to do with clients is, after we figure out kind of the topic and their audience, is sit down and do a mind mapping procedure. That can be done with mind mapping software. It can be done with index cards. It can be done with Post-it notes. You basically want to create something that you can visually see of all the ideas that are coming into your head that you think are related to this course that you might want to teach. And then you start like clustering them into what seems like groupings that make the most sense to you. You often find that ideas get sparked in this process that you may not have thought about before. And eventually what this is going to lead to is deciding what you want to include in your course. And it's amazing how many times when I've been working with people that what they originally thought they were going to put into kind of this big course that they were creating has enough content and makes more sense to divide out into 2 or 3 or 4 different courses that are more focused, and that it will be a better experience for your students if you consider all of that. So it's important to look at your mind mapping piece and come to a final conclusion of what do I want to actually put in this course that I'm building out. The next element is sequencing. Sequencing can be built on several different factors. It may need to take into account of like, I need to learn this step before I understand the next step. It could be related to a process plan of like, I need to do these things in this order to accomplish this task. Or it could be related to, something that's very specific to what you are teaching. But it's an important element to look at so your students have a framework and it makes sense of the order in which you are laying out and providing the information for them. Lesson plans and with this sequencing, we're going to start dividing things into modules, which are larger categories of learning, and individual lessons. And so with each lesson, you're going to want to create a lesson plan. If you come out of a teaching background, you're very familiar with these. If you don't, a lesson plan is basically just a written structure that provides a framework for you where you're defining what you want your students to learn, how you are going to approach teaching that to them, some of the high points, the bullet points that you want to make sure you cover with them, materials that you may want to have at hand to use, and if you're doing activities or exercises, those planned out and listed so you can walk the students through those. One of the other things that you need to decide with your learning objectives is what format's going to work best with this particular lesson plan. And you'll find it will vary depending on what you're trying to accomplish within a given lesson. Sometimes you may want to use group discussions. Sometimes you might have people, take a certain exercise and then discuss it afterwards. You may have people acting out an activity, doing a demonstration. There's a whole wide variety of activities and ways to engage your students. And so be thinking about in this process of what's going to help them learn the best of this particular content matter that I want them to learn. And then you also want to think about in your lesson plans, how am I going to assess if they actually learned this content or not? So writing learning objectives is a key learning skill that if you don't have background in it, it's an important one to get a grasp on. And a learning objective is simply like your outcome of what you want your students to learn within a particular session, or it could be within your whole course overall as a broader objective. It could be skills that they develop, attitudes that you want them to change, again, depending on your content matter, and the way in which you're going to teach them. It enables you to stay really focused on what you want to accomplish and your students to know what that is going ahead, a time when they're signing up with your course. Courses tend to get like this bloat sometimes associated with them if you don't keep things very tightly organized and structured and identified. And so learning objectives is one way to do that. There's 4 steps to writing clear and measurable learning objectives. First is to identify the level that you want your students to learn. I mentioned earlier, people can learn at a very basic, like understanding level or they could be at a level where you expect them to apply that knowledge to a unique situation. So you want to first think in terms of, okay, at what level are my students wanting and what level do I want them to gain this knowledge? Learning objectives have an action verb of what you're trying to get them to accomplish. You want to define specifically what they will learn in this element of teaching and under what conditions. An example that we use in a lesson for marketing research of your program, participants will be able to select their target audience and identify 10 sources for organic traffic to publicize their program. So saying who, under what conditions, and what you want them to learn. Bloom taxonomy. Bloom is an educator, and he devised a system talking about levels of knowledge and understanding. And with the pyramid here, you see at the very bottom, remembering is kind of like the lowest level of kind of gaining knowledge. Think of it in terms of reciting your states. You learn them, you're able to recall them, you're able to recite them. Partway on the pyramid, you have apply. So it's like you start to understand the knowledge, you can take that and apply it to a new situation. At the very top of the pyramid, you have create, and that's where you are, mastering the material. You're able to understand the concepts and not only apply them, but start designing your own unique approaches based on the mastery that you are learning and applying that to unique situations. With each of these, you can often find that's very helpful, a list of verbs that go with each level of understanding for this, and it's helpful as you're building out your learning objectives. The next thing I wanted to cover briefly, partly because I have a real resonance with it, my doctoral degree is in adult learning, but adult learning and taking that into consideration is important. Think about how you learned as you were going through school. It often was a teacher at the front of the classroom and them providing information and you needing to study that and give that back to them in a test situation. And then think about how you learn best today. And I venture a guess that that's probably not the same model of how you were taught. In adult learning, it's important to provide a context for our students of why they want to learn something and the approach that you are taking to help them learn that subject matter. You want to make sure whatever resources you are using to help teach them are really readily available. We know we're all busy. If they have to search things out, spend a lot of time on that, they may not be as diligent about, moving forward and completing the instruction that you're hoping that they go through the course with you. You want to provide clear instructions, taking into account how familiar they are with the technology, the tools that you are using within your teaching methodology. And sometimes it's necessary to schedule an extra session or two just to walk them through utilizing the technology, the resources that you're going to be using so that they don't miss out on something because they don't understand that part of the process. Adults also learn better in collaboration. So, look for ways that you can build collaborative elements into your courses, whether that is people breaking out into subgroups during part of a training session, or if it is having two partners work together on a project. There's lots of ways to build that in, and for adults, that helps with the learning process. You also want to draw upon their life experiences. As we get older, we have more and more life to draw upon. You have more life experiences to draw upon, and that helps make everything that you are learning relevant with that. And so as you're drawing upon those, try to relate it to things that may be going on in their life.
So we're going to talk a little bit about producing your program. So when looking at producing your program, there are a number of things that you need to take into consideration. So for example, is this a program that you are going to produce where it's going to require immediate delivery. So for example, the program we're doing today, where we've produced the program and now we're delivering it directly to you through a Zoom or something similar. Or are you producing a program that is going to be recorded? Is it going to be, produced as part of a webinar and then generated as an auto webinar down the road? Is it evergreen? So again, there's a lot of different ways that you can produce your program, and that's a course in of itself. But it's certainly something we want you to think about, because depending on how you're going to produce your program, there's a lot of things you have to consider. For example, the technology that you're going to use, whether you're going to be recording videos, your audio streams, are you going to be simulcasting, things like that. Then the next part of the building block is the part of marketing your program. How are you going to go about that process of marketing your program? Is this something that you are going to lean on social media? Are you going to set up an invite in LinkedIn and share, through your own individual contacts, invites where you can bring thousands of people potentially to a program? Are you going to advertise, for your program? Is this something that you're going to, set up a sequence of cold emails and do some type of cold email outreach? But of course, in that case, is this B2B or is it B2C, which brings a whole set of considerations when it comes to emailing. So there's a lot to consider with marketing your program. Then you've got your program delivery. How are you going to serve that program up? Again, is this something that's going to be part of a membership program where people will actually sign up and then be able to engage in this program of study themselves? Is this something that you're going to drip out over time? Is this, a program that's going to be, done like we're doing today, but then simulcast across a variety of audiences? So there's a number of things that you need to consider when it comes to your program delivery. And then finally, there's assessment and redesign. Unlike Lois, my background is 50 years in business and automation, integration, and marketing. But in all those years, I spent half my career in the corporate world, developing very large-scale programs, robotics, and large-scale software design products. If you didn't assess after each, process, you often ended up with programs that were seriously bloated and seriously expensive. So we strongly recommend that, along every step of the process, take the time to step back, assess, and look at how you might need to redesign. It'll save you time, it'll save you money. And then, of course, there's the 4 S's: streamline, SOPs, staff, and scale. I think one of the challenges for a lot of small business people is, the concept of working in your business versus working on your business. And a lot of small business people don't know how to let go. They don't know how to step back and let other people do it. They think, nobody can do it as well as I can. I learned very quickly that, I have a very specific area of expertise, and I very much try to stay in my lane, because that's where I can be the most productive and the most effective. My partner, Lois, is an expert in curriculum design and education. That's not my expertise. So I defer to her whenever it comes to anything along that line. So one, you want to streamline your program, and that the process of assessing and redesigning will help you to streamline. The standard operating procedures are critical, because the only way that you can actually grow is to bring on staff, bring on contractors, bring on VAs that you can then train. And how do you train them if you don't have written standard operating procedures by which you can deliver those to them so that they can basically follow a logical sequence to their work? The other thing you might also want to take into consideration, now that we're a global world, is that, different groups operate in different ways. They learn in different ways. They function in different ways. I was part of a study at one point in one of the organizations that I belong to, where they brought in this entire program, and everybody from the CEO down basically had to take on roles and literally build a company. And we had these fake widgets that we had to design and build. The thing that was interesting is that at the end of the day, we had to produce so many widgets. And by the end of the first day, we weren't successful. We couldn't produce the number of widgets we were required. Why? Well, it was built into the program for us to fail. And our objective was really to figure out why was it that we were failing. And one of the things that we discovered is that when you hand a set of written work instructions to different ethnic groups, they behave very differently. Americans plow right through. They don't stick to those work instructions. They just do their own thing. Where if you take typically a Japanese or an Asian worker, they follow those work instructions to the letter. They don't deviate. So it becomes really interesting when you have a multi-ethnic group, or as a small business person, you're trying to offshore and you're working with different ethnic groups. You need to understand how they operate. You need to understand how they conduct themselves that might be different to how you conduct yourself. So in order to grow, you've got to staff, and then ultimately you've got to scale.
So, we realized that was a really whirlwind tour. We tried to give you a very quick overview of some material that for us is often a multi-year program of going through and starting from concept, building out your whole course, launching a beta course, doing all the marketing, the program review and redesign, and scaling it up. So that was our whirlwind tour. We wanted to let you know that next week we are doing a 3-day challenge where we will be presenting some of the same material, but we have a little more time to go into some more depth, and we'll also be doing some interactive elements more so in that challenge, giving people some assignments to work on and feedback on those assignments and such. We also, as I mentioned, have a beta program that takes people through the whole process of building their course out. So either of those, if they're of interest to you, on the next slide, we've got our email address that you can just shoot us an email and let us know about that. And so, before we move on to questions, I did want to remind you, there is a survey that Marketers Trust would like you to fill out, and I'm going to drop that in the chat, and then you can grab that link and fill it out when you get a chance. That would be greatly appreciated. And
we should also mention, Lois, there are a number of upcoming programs that you can also participate in. The next program is on August 4th, 2 p.m. And it's on accelerating sales by leveraging the trust capital of your joint venture marketing partners. But you're welcome to participate in any of the upcoming programs we have. And this is something that you're going to be see ongoing, just a continuation of programs. So be sure to check back with us. And so with that, if there are specific questions that anybody has, feel free to ask.
Ellen just said we have a different survey there, and I guess we didn't get the right one sent to us.
Uh-oh.
Apologies.
There is no survey for the Marketing Trust. That one's just for another group that's similar to the Marketing Trust that you can join, and it's a very powerful roundtable marketing platform that David Rankin runs.
Thanks for the clarification there.
Deryck, this is Mark. I apologize for interrupting earlier. I thought I had my I was on mute.
Yeah, no worries.
Quick question: is your team at Marketing Trust purely advisory, or do you also do it done for you kind of agency?
Marketing Trust itself is both advisory as well as consultative. So you can certainly reach out to the Marketing Trust as a whole. In addition, each of the members of the Marketing Trust, ourselves, Ellen as an example, we all have our own programs, and in those programs, we do done for you, we do it with you, we do hybrid programs, and so on.
And where can I get more information on that range of services?
you can drop your email if you would like in the chat. We'll be happy to send you information. Or you can also write to excellence@igloodigitalmarketing.com.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Any other questions?
Questions?
I have a question about marketing.
Okay.
How do you reach out to populate your courses I guess, probably just through ads and other lead magnet kind of strategies, but what have you found works best when you're reaching a new audience?
Well, one thing I will tell you that, and over the last 50 years of doing this, it has changed massively, and particularly over the last, I'd say, 2 or 3 years, particularly with the onset of COVID, has changed a lot of things. Today, it's really about, building trust and getting people to come to you. And so the ways that you can do that are through, active programs of posting, writing blogs, writing articles for LinkedIn, writing, posts for Mention, and, any place where you can find where your audience exists, then publish posts, articles, and information where they reside. Because what will happen is they will see that, they will identify you as a potential expert in that area, and then they will outreach to you. It's the days have pretty much gone where, you can do any kind of strong sales tactics or even strong outreach. People are so tainted by, these just constant bombardments of emails and things like that, that it's, you really have to do things that will attract people to you.
Gone are the days where you could advertise and expect to get a big following, because, since the last couple of years, only the big players in terms of major corporations have the kind of money that it takes to effectively advertise. So we find most of our students are using kind of social media, demonstrating their expertise, building relationships with people. There's fast tracks to do that. There's slower tracks to do that. Part of it depends on your personality and what kinds of things you enjoy doing, how much of it you want to do yourself versus training a team that is going to do some of that work for you, how much you want to be kind of the visible front name out with your program versus a little more lower keyed, whether you like doing major publicity and those kinds of things. So there's a whole wide gamut of strategies to use, and we try to work with our students individually based on where they already do have an audience, what kinds of audience they're trying to grow, what systems may fit their personality the best in terms of outreach and being able to successfully do what it takes.
Yeah, I'll mention we're actually consulting, believe it or not. I mean, Igloo Excellence is an arm of Igloo Digital Marketing, and as Igloo Digital Marketing, we're for example working with a realty client up in Canada, and one of the first things that we discovered, because we hadn't worked in the Canadian market before, and one of the first things that we discovered is that nobody in Canada is advertising right now real estate. I mean, we dug deep, and I mean, there's like 1 or 2 companies that are doing a little bit of advertising, and it's just now as they're coming out of COVID, they're starting to do a little bit. It's kind of like they're putting their feet in the water to see if anybody will pick up on it. But for the past 2 years, if you go look, there's very little ad work that's being done at all in the real estate space.
I have a coach that I work with on kind of selling on social media and such. And, so many people are turning to doing just individual outreach to people because, the type of paid advertising that used to work just isn't getting any traction. Facebook and Instagram have changed their algorithms, and people are spending lots of useless money there, they find. So many of even the big time marketers that have well-established programs are having their staff do outreach to people who are interested in their subject matter on platforms that, gel well with them or the content that they're offering.
And then the other thing you have to keep in mind is that depending on, for example, on the social media side, depending on the platforms that you're choosing to operate on, is the time that a particular post sits. So for example, if you put something in Twitter, it's 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, what you've put is gone. If you look at, Facebook, or if you looked at LinkedIn, they each have basically a lifespan for that particular post. And if you don't know what that is, you could find yourself putting out posts and not getting a response because you're not operating within the proper time frame for that particular venue.
And one more point on social media, and then we can move on if people have other questions, but social media likes consistency. And so if you are writing articles or you're doing posts, your best opportunity is to create a consistent schedule on which you are doing that. Any of the social platforms are more apt to show what you are contributing if you do it in that manner, because they control how much of your content that you are creating that they're actually showing to your audience. So the more consistent you can be with that, the more reliable they think you are, and they start to show your content to more people.
So basically, the quizzes that I design are very useful for all of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Believe it or not,
only does it help
Ellen,
you find your ideal person, but it helps them engage and,
it's a two-way conversation.
Ellen, I'll tell you a
gets
funny
attention
story.
Quicker.
A few years back, I won't mention names, but I was working with a particular marketer that's pretty well known, and I was coaching all of his agency license owners. So there was about 500 people that I was coaching. And there were some serious problems with his support, so he was having some real difficulties. And I ended up forming a Facebook group called Survey Animal.
Oh no!
Yes, and the purpose of it was because he had formed one of his products had that as part of the name. It was called Survey, and so I had all these people in there that were looking for responses and things that they could do outside of that product. It had nothing to do with Survey. And then some time went by, and all of a sudden I started getting people that were coming into the group thinking it was about surveys. I wish I had known you back then, because I would have transitioned to the group to Survey.
And another member of the Marketing Trust, Merged Media up in Canada, is doing a great job of helping companies alternate or change the way they do their Facebook advertising so that it is more effective. So there are ways that you can
there are, but it also depends on what your niche is. The advertising is simply because in real estate there are better ways to do it.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Well, any other questions? Well, we really appreciate your taking the time and spending that time with us. And with that, I guess we'll bring this to a conclusion.
Yeah, hope to see you on another call.